Hello, I'm Pastor Harmon Lewis from Messiah Johns Creek. In our last lesson, we learned how God created the angels to be His mighty ones who do His bidding, who have been sent to serve those who will inherit salvation, and how they guard us and protect us in all our ways. But we also learned about how some of those angels sinned against God and became the demons and the devil. In this lesson, we're going to see what part the devil plays in mankind's fall into sin. The devil suffers from a serious case of displaced aggression. Having failed in his attempt to overthrow God, the devil sets out to do what he believes to be the next best thing. He sets out to overthrow God's king and queen of creation, Adam and Eve. In order to do that, the devil needs to lead Adam and Eve into sin. But how do you get a perfect man and a perfect woman to sin? In 1 John chapter 3, verse 4, we read, "Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness." In order to get Adam and Eve to sin, the devil needs to find a law that he can tempt them into breaking. The problem is, in the Garden of Eden, there are precious few laws to break. The Garden of Eden is a literal paradise that God creates for Adam and Eve. It has fruits and vegetables, plants, trees, streams, rivers. It has everything. It even has a church. You see, God knew that Adam and Eve would be grateful for all of the good gifts that He had given to them. He knew that they would want to say thank you. And so God creates a specific tree in the Garden of Eden, a tree called the knowledge of good and evil. And God says to Adam and Eve, you can enjoy everything in this garden. Just don't eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, right away, our sinful minds start to think, well, why did God create the tree in the first place? Is God just messing with them? Why is God testing them? Why is He teasing them? Clearly, this fruit is desirable and pleasing, as Eve describes it later on. So why did God create that tree in the first place? Well, that's how our sinful minds think. But God did not create this tree to tempt or test them. He created it as an opportunity for them to show their gratitude. It is, as I keep saying, their church. Every time Adam and Eve see the fruit on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and they obey God's command not to eat that fruit, they're worshiping their God. They're expressing their gratitude to God for all the good gifts that He has given them. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is another gift that God gives to Adam and Eve. But the devil looks at this gift and he sees opportunity. The devil hears God's command not to eat that fruit. He sees that there's a law, and the devil uses this gift from God, the church that God creates for His creation, and he uses it to bring about mankind's fall into sin. Mankind's fall into sin is recorded in Genesis chapter 3. There the devil invites Adam and Eve to doubt God. He asked, did God really say? It's a question the devil continues to tempt us with to this day. But he asked Adam and Eve, did God really say that you shouldn't eat from the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And when Adam and Eve confirmed that that is indeed what God says, and that God said if they ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that they would die, the devil progresses from inviting them to doubt God to calling God a downright liar. In Genesis chapter 3, verses 4 and 5, the devil replies, "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman. "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." The devil has accused God of being a liar when the reality is the devil is the one who is telling the lie, and he's doing a really good job of it. The devil knows that the best lies, the most successful lies, are the lies that contain a majority of truth. And so the devil tells Adam and Eve a lot of truth. He tells them, "You will not surely die." And that's true. When Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit, they don't drop dead on the spot. That happens much later. The devil tells them that they will be like God, that they will know the difference between good and evil. And that's true. But what he neglected to tell them, that they would know good because it's what they once were, and they would know evil because it is what they would become. The devil tells a very good lie. As a result, we read in verse 6, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. The devil's desires have now become Eve's desires. Eve is no longer content to be God's queen of his creation. Now Eve wants to be a god herself. And so she reaches out, grabs hold of that forbidden fruit, and bites into it. And with that bite, she plunges all of creation into sin. Now there would be some who say that, well, then it's the woman's fault. Because Eve ate the forbidden fruit, because a woman sinned against God, now we all have to suffer the consequences. But before we quickly blame the woman, it's good for us to remember that God holds Adam accountable. You see, God made Adam to be the head of his family. It was Adam's job, his duty, his obligation to protect and guard his wife. Adam, who was there, should have said to his wife, "Dear wife, let's stop talking to the strange snake." But instead, Adam says nothing. He abandons his responsibilities, blindly follows his wife into sin. The consequences for Adam and Eve's rebellion against God are severe. God first turns his attention to the devil and deals with the devil for his part in mankind's fall into sin. And then God turns his attention to Adam and Eve. In Genesis chapter 3, verses 16 through 19, and in verse 23, we read, "To the woman he said, 'I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you.' To Adam he said, 'Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return.' So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken." The consequences of the fall into sin are severe. God tells Eve that he will greatly increase her pain in childbirth. Now, I have watched my wife give birth to all three of our children. I have to tell you, I have no way of comprehending how that wasn't going to be painful. But the fact that women endure pain in childbirth is a consequence of sin. And then God says to Eve that her desire will be for her husband, but he will rule over her. This beautiful relationship that was one of harmony between the husband and wife, where she, the suitable helper, was the perfect complement to her husband. They were to work together as equals in harmony. But now, because of the fall into sin, her desire would be for her husband, but he would rule over her. Even the marriage relationship would feel the consequences of the fall into sin. And then God says to Adam that through painful toil, by the sweat of his brow, will he eat his food. The ground that once willingly, gladly, easily provided Adam with fruits and vegetables and everything that he needed to sustain his body and life, now that very ground would resist him. It would produce thorns and thistles. By the sweat of his brow, Adam would have to wrestle his food from the earth. And then God says to Adam and Eve, "From dust you came, and to dust you shall return." Mankind that apparently was created without an expiration date would now die because of the fall into sin. And then finally, Adam and Eve are evicted from the Garden of Eden. The immediate consequences for the fall into sin, they're severe. In our lesson for today, we saw how God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as a way for Adam and Eve to express their gratitude to God for all the good gifts that He had given them. But we saw how the devil took this gift from God and twisted it and used it to tempt Adam and Eve into sin. And then finally, we talked about the resulting tragedy that comes from the fall into sin. In our next lesson, we'll talk about how the fall into sin continues to affect you and me to this day. I hope you'll join me for that lesson.